Imagine a world of no more privacy, where your every purchase was monitored and recorded in a database, where your every belonging was numbered, where someone many states away or perhaps in another country had a record of everything you had ever bought, of everything you owned, of every item of clothing in your closet, every pair of shoes. Imagine a world where even people were numbered and tracked at a distance. My own thoughts about privacy led me to begin researching the issue about 4 years ago. In 1999, I became concerned about supermarket and grocery store cards, the seemingly harmless loyalty cards that you began getting asked for in the early 1990s in order to qualify for discounts at the supermarket. What I learned was that those programs were essentially registration systems that were taking all of our food purchases that we made at the store, linking them up with our names and our personal identifying information, and storing them in databases. Since 1999, when I made that discovery, I have spent the last 4 years of my life deep in research about tracking and monitoring programs involving retail spaces, buying and selling, and purchasing. And the world that I just described, where your every belonging is cataloged in a database, may not be that far off. If we move to a world where your every belonging is in a database and can be tracked remotely, which is what we'll be talking about in the next hour, we will also move to a world in which your every move can also be tracked and monitored remotely. Let me first start by talking a little bit about my background and the supermarket grocery card issue and how it has paved the way for what will ultimately be one of the most invasive things I believe the human mind has ever invented when it comes to privacy. In the early 1990s, grocery stores hit on an idea that if they could find a way to offer you something special in exchange for shopping at their store, that you might be more likely to go there instead of to the competitor. So in the early 1990s, a couple of grocery stores got started printing up little cards asking you for registration information. And when you filled that out and you went to the grocery store, you qualified for actual discounts. And those discounts would be above and beyond the regular supermarket discount of the regular items on sale. And it worked pretty well for the first couple of years. And then what happened was that other stores began getting on board. And then the database folks got involved. And they started telling supermarkets, listen, you need to go to the next step and you need to begin actually monitoring what people buy over time. Because by doing that, you can identify who your good customers are and who your maybe not so good customers are. So what happened was these grocery store cards became linked to incredibly detailed databases of information, to the point where now oftentimes those databases of information will contain what they call, the supermarket can buy something they call a penetration profile, which includes additional information about you, not only what brand of orange juice you buy or how often you buy toilet paper, but they can also buy information such as how much your home mortgage is, or your auto insurance record, or the type of car you drive, or even your dress size. Once that information began getting collected in these large databases, the databases began growing and growing, to the point where now these databases are absolutely enormous. The card programs, the food purchase registration programs is what I call them, have now spread over the entire globe. The last I heard, a program was going into the nation of Yemen in the Middle East. So they have truly become international. They operate a little bit differently in different countries. In some countries you get points or rewards, sort of like the old-fashioned S&H green stamps. Here in the United States, though, the model is still a two-tiered pricing program where if you don't comply, you pay a higher price. What we found through, or what I found through my research in the last couple of years, is that very coercive tactics were used to get people to sign up, such as in some cases doubling the price of certain grocery items if you didn't have a card, and leaving the price at the manufacturer's suggested retail price. In other words, no discount at all, even when you did present a card. We found that the prices at card stores are higher, and we found a whole host of problems with these programs. But nevertheless, what has happened is over the last 10 to 13 years now, about 80% of American households now participate in some form of purchase registration program through those cards. Now, in the course of doing this research, last year I was asked to write an article for the Denver Law Review. And they said, what we'd really like to know is what are the privacy implications of having purchases monitored and registered in databases? What really does that mean, and how deep does that problem run? And in doing that research, I spent about 3 months reading very esoteric industry journals, reading retail industry journals, reading electronics journals, reading anything I could get my hands on to try to answer that question of how far does the surveillance and registration go. And I stumbled across something in the course of doing that research that absolutely made my hair stand on end. And that something is what we'll be talking about tonight, radio frequency identification. Now, at the time that I stumbled across this about a year and a half ago, it was the radio frequency, and I'll be explaining what it is, and I'll try to be non-technical tonight because it can be a bit of a technical concept. At the time that I stumbled across this in doing research for this other article, it was not known really by anyone that this was happening. Only a handful of engineers at research institutions like MIT and the, of course, global corporations that were funding it and were behind it. And let's see if we can do our first slide. What I discovered was that out of MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that's based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and it's where we get some of our best engineering and mathematics and science minds get trained at MIT. MIT had hooked up with Procter & Gamble and Gillette to create something called the Auto ID Center. Auto meaning automatic, not automotive. Auto ID meaning automatic identification. And what the engineers and scientists at MIT, Procter & Gamble, and Gillette got together to do was to take an existing technology using radio waves, similar to the radio waves that communicate with your radio, and use that instead to communicate items or physical objects to the Internet. Now, in 1999, when they formed this organization to do this, they had very little funding. They had what many considered to be a pipe dream that would be almost impossible to fulfill. They had some huge technical hurdles ahead of them to overcome. They have overcome them, and in a very short period of time, and in a way that is actually quite extraordinary. What they have developed is a system to literally number every physical item on the planet Earth with its own unique identifying number. The way the system works is they've developed something called an EPC, EPC standing for Electronic Product Code. Some of you may have heard of the UPC, that's the formal name of the barcode that we see on products introduced in the 1970s on a broad scale. The barcode UPC is the Universal Product Code, and we are now switching to the EPC RFID chip code. Now, this image here shows the tiny silicon chips, and what you're looking here is at a dime, and together with that is a little vial filled with water, and what look like tiny specks of glitter or dust. They're incredibly small. In fact, let's see if I can, this particular chip here is only 0.4 millimeters across, and you can see it compared with a grain of rice. That's a chip produced by Hitachi, which is currently the smallest of these chips in the world. And now let's talk about what they do. Each of these chips contains an EPC number, or a unique identifying number, different from every other chip. Now, you can think about them in a way, they've been referred to as tiny computer chips, but when we think about computer chips, we usually think about something that does something, maybe performs some calculations. All these really do is store data, and the data that they store is their unique identifying number. That number can be, let's say 96 bits. That's one of the possible numbers proposed for this. 96 bits, not to be too technical, would be a series of 96 zeros and ones. And to put that in perspective, I've been told that with 96 zeros and ones, you can have enough combinations of unique numbers to number every grain of sand on the planet Earth. So it actually is quite feasible to use 96 zeros and ones to number every item on the planet. Now, the next question is, well, what do you do with numbering every item on the planet, and why would anyone want to do that? Well, the RFID chips themselves, these tiny little devices, in and of themselves, even if you did number everything and stick one of those in there, it would be difficult to actually know what the contents of the chip were. So the tiny chips, let me just explain the technology here. The tiny chips with their own unique identifying numbers are hooked up to antennas. The antennas look, this is one example of an RFID antenna. You see the tiny little chip there in the center, and it's hooked up to some metal coil or flattened metal wire that serves as an antenna. These antennas can take a variety of different shapes. Sometimes they look like children's mazes, and what we'll be talking about later, sometimes they look even like spray-on ink or foil. Now, the way this functions is that, let's envision that we have a shoe. And we'll be talking about this shoe a little bit later on specifically. But let's say that we have a shoe and we want to number this particular item. We can stick a label or a tag on it with a barcode, but then that would not distinguish it from every other shoe that is also produced by the Soho brand and is a size 8. The barcode would be the same for all of those shoes. If we put a unique identifying number using one of these RFID chips and an antenna on it, we can assign it its own unique number. Now the question becomes, how do we read it? And the way the technology works is reader devices in the environment, which are about the size of, I've seen them about the size of a hardback book. A reader device would send out a constant pulse of electromagnetic energy. The electromagnetic energy would be picked up by the antenna. It would then stimulate the little chip to say, here I am, I'm chip number 03842799, et cetera, 96, 96 different digits of length there. And it would send that information back out to the reader device, which would then pick it up and say, aha, I just detected an item, here's the number of it. Now let me look it up in the database. And looking it up in the database, you can say, oh, that's a pair of shoes that was bought at a Walmart store on June 15th using credit card number 604829. So that's that. In a nutshell, that's how the technology is designed to work. And now we'll be talking about some of the nuts and bolts of that. All right, so we've got the world's smallest RFID chip. Now again, remember that the chip in and of itself simply contains the number. It does need to be hooked up to some form of antenna so that it can be stimulated by one of those reader devices that would hit it with energy. Now, the technology, again, being designed by Procter & Gamble and Gillette. And by the way, this Auto ID Center at MIT now has 103 sponsors, including some of the biggest consumer product manufacturers in the world, including companies like Philip Morris, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, Walmart, Home Depot, big companies, and including government agencies such as the Department of Defense and the United States Postal Service, and also UPS. So, they're serious about this, and they're putting a lot of money into it, and now there's 103 companies working on this. Now, their stated goal is to use this technology to replace the barcode, to literally put one of these numbering devices on every physical item manufactured on planet Earth, in every country, in every factory, rolling off of every assembly line. Now, replacing the barcode means a couple of things, and let's talk about the difference between this technology and barcode technology. Every pack of gum, Dentyne is owned by Pfizer, which is one of the sponsors of this Auto ID Center. We'll get to that one in a second. Now, there are a couple of ways that we need to be concerned about this replacing the barcode. The barcode, as we said earlier, would have the same barcode image and the same UPC number for every can of Coke. So if I've got a can of Coke up here in the podium and you've got one back there and maybe a couple in your fridge at home, all of those cans of Coke would contain the very same UPC number. Now what that means is when you purchased it and you scanned your supermarket loyalty card or you scanned your credit card, which is now how they're recording your data, using the infrastructure created by the supermarket card, now they can use your credit card to record the same information, even if you don't have a loyalty card. So what would be recorded when you scan your grocery card or your credit card would be simply the fact that you bought a six-pack of Coke, not which Cokes. With this new system, every single one of those cans of Coke would have a unique number associated with it. And each one of those 6 numbers in that 6-pack of Coke would go into a database unless we do something to prevent it. The default state of how this information is recorded in order to ring up the sale would record your name and your purchase, your identity, along with those 6 individual numbers on those cans of Coke. Now, what would that mean? Well, let's say down the road, one of those cans of Coke, I don't know, the guy picking up your garbage is careless and he lets one of them roll down the street. And let's say the litter police come along the next day and they pick up that can of Coke. They can actually run a reader over it, figure out its unique identifying number, look it up in a database, and see that you were the person making the purchase. And you could get, an automatic littering ticket in the mail. Worse yet, let's say that someone snuck by when your garbage was out on the curb and stole that piece of trash and took that can of Coke and planted it at a crime scene with your fingerprints on it. Now it gets scanned, and you get a knock on the door from someone asking, what's your alibi for, the evening of the 15th? So that's just one way in which this is different from a UPC barcode, in that it creates, in essence, a registration system for physical items. Now, depending on your politics, I don't know where folks listening to this stand on guns, but there has been some real concern about registration of guns. And one of the arguments that's commonly used to argue against registration of guns is the fact that in countries where registration of guns has been carried out in the past, oftentimes registration leads to forms of control. Now, if it's guns, maybe that's one thing. If it becomes food, that becomes a very serious issue. Recording of items based on my own extensive research of history and looking at totalitarian regimes throughout the 20th century, I think that there are many evil governments that would have loved the opportunity to record what everyone bought in the hopes of being able at some point to control those purchases or those items down the road. Now, there are actually three ways in which this technology is different from the barcode. We just talked about the first one, in that every item would have a unique identifying number. The second way in which these are fundamentally different from a barcode is the way that creates massive privacy problems. And that is that unlike a barcode, where if you hold an item up, you've got to actually put it up to the barcode reader and actually get a read off of it. You need what's called a line of sight to where the reader actually sees the barcode device. With an RFID chip, when we call them spy chips, with a spy chip, you can actually read through someone's clothing. You can read through their suitcase. You can read through their purse, through their backpack, through their briefcase, through their pocket, through their wallet, through their clothes. So the things that we normally count on to provide us with privacy protection, you don't want somebody to see something, you put it in a bag. You don't want somebody to know how much money you're carrying, you put it in your wallet, you put your wallet in your purse. You don't want the criminal down the, hanging out in the corner to know you're carrying a $600 camcorder. You put it in a bag and you sling it over your shoulder. You don't go carrying things out in plain sight. This technology removes the privacy that humankind has had forever, which is the fact that you cannot see through things. People don't have X-ray vision. This provides criminals, marketers, unscrupulous people running stores, unscrupulous governments with the opportunity to bypass what most of us would consider privacy protection and actually see through our clothes, even down to the size and color of our underwear if someone chose to do that, if they have access to one of these reader devices. So the fact that they can be read through items. The other problem, they can be read without your knowledge. The reader devices are silent. They can be undetected. They can be hidden in doorways. They can be hidden in floors. They can be embedded into floor tiles, woven into carpet. These reader devices can exist pretty much anywhere. And you would have no way of knowing it was there and no way of knowing that it was reading you and detecting what you were carrying. And the other problem with this is that these devices can read these tags at a distance. In some cases, the distance is only a couple of inches. In some cases, that distance can be 20, even 30 feet away. So let's fast forward 10 years, and let's say that everything you're wearing and carrying is equipped with one of these devices. And I have a reader up here at the podium. I could actually, without you knowing, flip it on, get a total inventory of every single thing in this room, and you would never be the wiser. So I would know everything that you were wearing or carrying. Now, we'll talk a little bit later about read range, about whether it's 2 inches or 30 feet and how that affects privacy. And one of the things you may think of right off the bat is, well, what good would it do me to know every single item in this room instead of knowing every single item that you personally were carrying? And we'll get to that in a minute. All right. Now, this technology is not science fiction. It is happening right now. Already, companies are heavily invested in this. There are a number of companies that have already done trials in real stores, in real Walmart and Target stores in the United States, in Home Depot stores as well. Also in a chain in England called Tesco, and in a chain in Germany called Metro. We have reason to suspect that a number of other retailers have been participating in these trials. But shoppers in those stores have actually picked up items with these tags and purchased them and taken them home with them without knowing about it. One example, and I think this is one of the ones that if anybody's a mom in here, they've actually hidden these devices in Huggies baby wipes, of all things. Other products that have been shipped with these tiny tags on a trial basis include Gillette razor blades, which we'll be talking about in some level of detail, Pantene shampoo, Caress soap, Coca-Cola 2-liter bottles. right guard, aerosol deodorant, and a number of other things. So things you may actually be purchasing. Now, there's a pretty good chance that this has not yet happened here in South Bend, Indiana. We don't know the locations because the companies doing these trials have been extremely secretive about them. We have obtained, however, some internal documents, and we do know some of the locations where these trials have taken place. But we certainly by no means know everything that's happening with this technology. In fact, one of the demos of this, and I believe this comes from Checkpoint, is actually a man's suit, where underneath that lovely little silk label and the inside lapel has actually been embedded what's called an EAS chip, or an EAS tag, I'm sorry. And what you see there, if you take a look at the image, you'll see a little square that looks like a frame. If you could see that up close, what you would see would be an antenna actually running around and around. It's a flat bit of coil, of coiled wire. And there are two versions of these items, these EAS, Electronic Article Surveillance Tags. And you may already have seen one of these. Sometimes they're on the back of the price tag in certain items. Sometimes they're in the pocket of pants that you might buy. If you see one of those, one of the problems that we have is that there are two versions of this technology. Right now there's an EAS tag that has an on-off state, and that's your more standard theft prevention device, where when you buy something, they have to put it against the scanner, demagnetize it, or turn it off, deactivate it before you go out the door. And every once in a while they don't do it right, and you set off the beeper, and then they go in, you got to go through and show them the receipt. Okay, that technology, that electronic article surveillance technology, has been around for a while. Much of that is produced by a company called Checkpoint, and Checkpoint also creates the reader devices in the doorway that you have to walk through when you go in and out of the mall or when you go in and out of stores. Checkpoint is heavily invested in converting their standard EAS tags into these type of RFID tags that would contain individual, unique identifying numbers. So if you bought a suit, for example, and you knew it had a Checkpoint device in it, it would be virtually impossible at this stage to know which type of device you had. And it's entirely possible that the suit you bought with a Checkpoint device in it had a unique identifying number that could be linked up with you, could be picked up at a distance after you leave the store, in fact, for the entire life of the suit. These items, these tags, when put into clothing, you would think, oh, well, a couple trips through the wash should take care of that. They actually are not deactivated by being washed. They are one of the standard applications for these RFID tags, these unique item tracking tags, is to put them into uniforms that are washed at very high commercial temperatures and dried in commercial dryers. So it does not kill them to go through the washer and dryer. They can handle 10 years of that kind of abuse and not be killed. The problem, as we mentioned earlier, is RFID enables something called silent commerce. And it's one of the stated goals of, I would almost be tempted to say, global business, to have a system of silent commerce whereby everything in the supply chain, now the supply chain means everything from the manufacturer who gets the raw materials in the factory and makes the goods to that then gets shipped to a place where maybe it gets packaged, that gets shipped to a warehouse where it sits for a while and gets distributed out to the individual stores, all the way to the cash register and into your home. So the supply chain means actually supplying goods at various levels to various people until finally it winds up with us. So the goal of the supply chain on the side of global business is to know where everything is at all times. So they hate the idea that, they may produce something in Singapore and then transfer it over to China and then transfer it over to Topeka and then it gets distributed, and they may lose track of those items. Now that we're in an era where things get shipped all over the world, that's a real problem for businesses, and this is one of their proposed solutions. So there's a couple of things driving this technology. I think right now the goal, obviously some people have the goal of using it to track individuals, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but I think the driving force behind it right now in terms of money is the desire to track products so that things don't get lost, so that when a truck drives into a warehouse, for example, the total inventory of everything on the truck can be made. One example is the Department of Defense was using this because they want to know, let's say they've got a big truck full of stuff and they unload it into a tent, and now they need to find a fan belt for a Jeep, and they don't know which box it's in. They can use this technology to scan the boxes and know their contents right through the box until they find the one that says, yeah, I'm the fan belt. So you can understand why on the supply side, people in charge of moving large quantities of stuff over large distances that can be quite confusing might want this technology. The problem is it doesn't stop there. There are already marketers, the very same people who are interested in knowing how much your home mortgage is and what your dress size is when you're buying orange juice at the supermarket. Those people have very, very interesting plans for this technology and for us. All right. And let's talk about those. The grocery store card, which has been near and dear to my heart, is something that I have loathed and despised for many years. The grocery store card, I've actually have this device that you see here on the screen. This is the next generation grocery store loyalty card. And what it is it is a plastic device. In the center where you see those antennas converging on one little speck, that speck is the RFID chip, the radio frequency identification chip with its own unique number. The things emanating out from it are antennas, and in fact the gentleman who gave me this was boasting that this is one of the few RFID tags out there that has two antennas, meaning that it can be read from inside of your wallet or purse, regardless of whether it's lying down or sitting upright or how it's oriented to the reader, and that it can be read without you taking it out of your wallet or purse as you walk through the doorway of the store from up to 20 feet away. Now, why would a grocery store want to know who you are before you even take your wallet out or before you even put a single item into your grocery cart? And the answer to that is that the grocery stores and other retailers have now gotten into the business of identifying profitability segments, where they actually make a determination based on your entire shopping history. Now remember, up until the 1990s, there was really no way for a merchant to know what your shopping history was. So we all got treated equally and kind of democratically when we walked into the store. Customers always right, and when you walked in, they would greet you with a smile no matter what, because who knows how much money you were carrying in your wallet. This changes everything, because now if you take this technology, which can identify you, you link it with a loyalty card, which contains all of your past purchase history, they can run sophisticated computer analyses on you and determine whether you are what they call the preferred shopper in the top tier, and that's probably the top 20-25% of shoppers that account for most of their profits, or whether you are in the bottom tier of profitability, the person who goes in and only buys things on sale. And they use ugly terms to refer to those shoppers. They call them things like bottom feeders and thieves. And they use terms to refer to how they would like to treat those shoppers, such as digital redlining. Meaning that if you were one of those shoppers and you reveal your purchase history to them by scanning a loyalty card, and let's say you're a college student, or let's say you're a little low on your luck, or you maybe just like to shop frugally, and you've been buying items on special, they want to identify you, and according to the advice of some supermarket consultants that I've been reading lately, they would like to offer you higher prices and poor service to discourage you from shopping at the store altogether. In fact, there is an article in a magazine called In-Store Marketing in England, which actually talked about formalizing this process, identifying people before they walk into stores in order to actually ask them not to shop there, possibly even putting bouncers at the door so that if they identified you as someone, who's returned 3 items in the past year, they would actually have someone come up to you and say, we're sorry, we simply can't please you. We've noticed that we're just not good enough for you. We'd like to escort you to the door and ask you to shop somewhere else. Now, on the other hand, if you're one of the top shoppers and you're in this upper tier, you might be listening to this going, well, I kind of like that idea. They're going to treat me the way I deserve to be treated, as a valuable customer. Well, your road is going to be even worse, because all of the microscopes are going to be trained on you, because you're who they want to target. And they do use words like target and prey. Like, you are their prey, you're their quarry, was another one that I saw recently. You are their target. So if you're in the top tier, it may even be worse for you, because it means that they will do things like train their surveillance cameras on you and follow you around the store. By the way, those surveillance cameras that you think are there to catch shoplifters, nowadays their primary use is to follow people around for market research purposes. In fact, some of those cameras are so sophisticated that as you stop and you pick up a package to read the back of it, it will actually zoom in and take a close-up look of your consumer expression on your face as you're reading the package. Companies who do that include a company called, get this right, EnviroCell, S-E-L-L, is selling in the environment. They will actually come in for a fee and wire any retail establishment or restaurant with extensive and sophisticated surveillance equipment that will actually record people's conversations. They will actually even send in fake shoppers who will push a little cart around next to you and record everything you say and do. They will actually take fact, I think probably the worst thing I heard of EnviroCell doing was they actually wired a Denny's restaurant with hidden cameras and hidden microphones to record people's conversations as they interacted with the menu. And their stated reason is they want to improve your shopping experience. This is all for your own good. It's going to make things better in that restaurant for you. Now, if you can imagine that all of this infrastructure is in place, oh, and let me name a few other things. They have thermal heat sensors that can track you around the store. They have trackers in the floor that can tell how much you weigh as you stand in front of something. So you take all of this sophisticated surveillance and tracking technology, and the only thing that they have not been able to do as they track you around and see what color hair you have and what's in your basket is they have not been able to tell exactly who you are, unless you did something like pay with a credit card or scan a supermarket card, which is something I would recommend everyone in this room stop doing immediately. Pay cash while you can. Now, the thing they've not been able to do is know who you are. With this, let me see if I can get it back up, okay? There we go. With this new loyalty card, which, by the way, you would probably not even know you were carrying, with this new loyalty card, they can identify you as you walk in the door, and they can then track you actually around the store. There are shelves with digital, real-time price changers on them, where actually you can, and in fact, one of their ideas here is to offer different prices to different people. So as you approach the shelf would actually be able to interact with some device that would beam your identity, maybe like a mobile speed pass. There's a store called Stop and Shop in New England that's actually using mobile speed pass devices for payment. The prototype is you would beam your little speed pass at the shelf, and the shelf would beam back your own unique individual price. Now, ultimately, the goal would be to charge everyone a different price based on who they are, and of course, they can't do that until they've identified who you are. And the idea for those bottom feeders or those thieves or those people at the bottom of the shopping profitability tier, the idea would be to make them pull their weight by charging them incredibly high prices, or discourage them from being there at all because, of course, they're just taking up space and pushing around a cart and breathing the air and using up your cashier's time. And we don't want those kind of shoppers around here. And hopefully one of these days we'll figure out how to get rid of them altogether. So the next thing they're working on is putting these identifying chips into credit cards. And in fact, IBM has a proposal underway right now to embed these remote identification chips into people's checkbooks, their ATM cards, their passbooks, so that the same thing can happen to you when you walk through the door of your bank. So as you walk into the bank, the stated goal here is that they would know how valuable you were to the bank so they'd know how to treat you. So if you're the person who has, $500,000 in your bank right up to the federal insurance limit, then who knows, the bank manager may come over with a glass of wine and invite you into his office. If you're the schmo who walks in with 37 cents in your bank account, those doors may actually close up and you may find yourself rerouted down to the basement where there's a swinging light bulb and a teller and a line 50 people long. And that's almost happened to me actually at my bank branch in Cambridge, where they actually have put the tellers down in the basement, almost in the dark. It's kind of creepy. I don't believe they can identify us yet through our bank cards, but it's definitely coming. Now, this device that you see here, this Visa device, this is part of the emerging trend of smart cards. When you hear about smart cards, and by the way, these tags that we're talking about that I call spy chips or spy tags, they're, the opposite spin on these is to call them smart tags and smart chips, that they're going to make things safer and smarter and better and somehow more wonderful for us. They're doing the same thing with the credit cards. If you are offered a credit card with a smart chip in it, run screaming, say no. You really don't want that chip in there because the chip can contain all sorts of information about you. It can be more sophisticated than simply the number that identifies you or that beams out your identity over a distance. It can actually contain much more detailed information about you, and even where you've used the card, your last couple of shopping trips could be stored on there. There's really no limit to what they can put on there because they can store data. And again, the problem here, as you can see from this image, is you have no way of knowing that this tiny device is inside of there. And now, when you're in the store, what else could happen to violate your privacy using RFID? Well, Gillette has actually been using these tags to violate people's privacy in the name of stopping shoplifters. This image here comes from confidential internal documents from the Auto ID Center at MIT. We actually, and I, by the way, run a consumer organization called Caspian. You can look them up online. Will be the first search hit you see. Caspian stands for Consumers Against Supermarket Privacy Invasion and Numbering. And our website is online at www.nocards.org. No cards because we fight supermarket cards. That's how we got started. One of the things that researchers at Caspian discovered a couple months back in poking around the Auto ID Center's website was that by simply typing in the word confidential in the search engine on their homepage, you could actually access all of their confidential internal strategy documents. And what made this particularly ironic was that when this organization was asked, what are you going to do about all this data you're going to be collecting on people? How is that going to be protected? And their answer was, don't worry, internet security is completely foolproof. And of course, it was just a couple weeks later that we proved that these folks couldn't even protect their own privacy. I have very little faith in their ability to protect ours. So it did create kind of a gold mine for us in terms of understanding what they're doing. And in fact, had it not been for that little mistake, we would not know about the Huggies baby wipes and the Caress soap and the Walmart trials and the Gillette Smart Shelves and everything else that we know about. So a lot of what you're learning about in this talk comes directly from the Auto ID Center and from their own internal documents. So what we found was this one image, and I realize it's not incredibly clear here, but it says RF-enabled shelf, theft prediction, and deterrence at shelf. Now, Gillette razor blades are one of the most stolen items in retail stores. Right? They're very value-dense. A crate of Gillette razor blades. In fact, if you think about it, I've got maybe a 5-ounce package of Gillette razor blades that was $10. So if you picture a big crate of those, they're worth a lot of money. And a lot of them do get stolen. Now, most of them get stolen on the supply side, where maybe a truck driver, kind of goes in to get a cup of coffee, leaves maybe the back door unlocked, and a buddy comes over and crowbars it open and takes off a couple of, crates of razor blades. But they do have a legitimate theft problem. It is a problem for Gillette. Their solution to it, though, is one that I have a real problem with. What they decided to do, let me see if I can find it. There we go. Is hide RFID tags in Gillette products. Now, this is an X-ray image, and in fact, it's a little bit difficult to see because I believe the bottom part of my screen is getting cut off there, but we'll see if we can fix that. In the bottom of this X-rayed Gillette package, what you would be seeing, and you know what? Well, what you would be seeing would be the actual RFID tag. It goes around and around like a coil. It's got the chip in the middle of it. And they were actually sticking those with adhesive right onto the inside of their package. And they were boasting that not one person complained about seeing this tiny thing in there. Of course, who would know what it was if you saw it in there? Well, once it was in there, they were using something they call a smart shelf, which we call a spy shelf, to detect the presence of the razor blades on the shelf in the store. Now, if you look there, you'll see a little black device underneath the shelf. The shelf is plastic because these metal interferes with the radio frequency. So one tip-off to the fact that your store may be messing around with this technology is if the metal shelves start coming out and different-looking plastic shelves start coming in. That's usually one of the first signs that this is happening. Now, this tiny device underneath here is an RFID reader. It reads the presence of the razor blades on top of the shelf. So it might be saying constantly with its little energy beaming out, 20 razor blades, 20 razor blades, 20 razor blades. And then when you pick one up, it goes, oh, 19 razor blades. And then a hidden camera in the shelf snaps a close-up of your face, a mugshot of you, as you pick up the razor blade off the shelf. Now, they take this mugshot, and it gets redirected back to security. As you walk around the store, we have reason to suspect, although we're not certain, that it actually tracks you around the store with the package of razor blades. There's a sort of ambiguous image on their website that would indicate that, but I won't say that with certainty. However, what we do know is when you get to the check stand to pay for those razor blades, and you scan that barcode number in, it goes, oh, Gillette razor blades, we're monitoring those, and you get a second close-up of your face taken with a hidden camera. At the end of the day, security compares all the images from camera A to all the images of camera B to make sure that every person picking up razor blades was later shown and photographed paying for those razor blades. If for some reason you picked up the razor blades and you were not photographed at the check stand paying for them, you are now a potential shoplifter. Your picture gets printed out and blown up and distributed to security, and the next time you go in that store, believe me, that entire surveillance arsenal that they have in there tracks your every move. Now, some people would say, well, that's a good thing. We don't want shoplifting. Maybe that'll bring down prices. Well, let me say a couple things about that. These tags right now cost, it's estimated, between 20 and 60 cents a piece. And I bet you that we're the ones paying for it as consumers. The other thing I have serious concerns about is that we are a nation with a system of jurisprudence that is based on assuming people are innocent until proven guilty. Now, the current system of shoplifting prevention, as you go out the door, you set off a buzzer, which says, maybe we have a reason to suspect you. You set off a buzzer, prove you didn't do it, and that's okay. Show me your receipt, and you're fine. This system assumes every single person picking up a package of Gillette razor blades is a criminal, and takes your picture, assuming you are a criminal until you prove yourself innocent. So it's really the opposite system. Guilty until proven innocent. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a lifetime Gillette razor user. I've never used another brand until just recently. And my sense about these razor blades is they're unbelievably expensive. A 4-pack of razor blades can be $7 to $10 depending on where you buy it. Now, my sense is if I'm going to part with $10 of my hard-earned money, you should have a mariachi band and hand me a margarita. You should not be taking my picture without my knowledge or permission, tracking me around the store, and assuming I'm a shoplifter. So we have actually called for a worldwide boycott of Gillette, and everyone in this room, I would encourage you to join us in that and to spread the information about this to your friends and people that you know who may be buying Gillette products. And I figure it's worth maybe trying a different brand and learning to get used to a different kind of razor if we can put a stop to this. Now, what's happening is Gillette and these other trials are being watched like a hawk by the other 102 or 100 sponsors of this organization to see how will consumers react once they learn about this. Their original hope was that consumers wouldn't learn about it. We've changed that. I've been on radio all over the world where have I been? Tasmania and Sweden and France. I've done interviews all over the world. And we've gotten this story out, particularly in England where this trial was openly underway in a grocery chain called Tesco. So people are outraged when they learn about it. They go ballistic. And that's the good news. By the way, in those internal documents we got from the Auto ID Center, let me share a bit of good news because I know this can be a bad news seminar we're doing here. The good news, 78% of people in their surveys do not like this technology on privacy grounds. 78% of people oppose it on privacy grounds. They believe, as they should, that this technology will be abused, it will get out of control, and people won't be able to stop it, and that we cannot trust these companies to do the right thing with this technology. And already, I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of abuse here with this trial. All right. Target has been, let's see if we can get this up. There we go. Target has been embedding these in DVDs, by the way, right now in real time in the United States in stores across the U.S. I had said that there are three ways in which RFID technology is different from the barcode. The first one, of course, the individual unique number, creating a registration system for items with people. The second way being that it can be read through your clothing or your suitcase or your wallet from a distance. The third way we haven't talked about yet, and that is that this technology, if it becomes pervasive, will cause all of us to be exposed to a constant chronic level of electromagnetic energy in the environment. And we honestly do not know the health effects of being continually bombarded with this type of energy. So what this means is if you actually have, and by the way, the proponents of this technology envision, and I believe this is a quote, a pervasive global network of reader devices everywhere, all the way down to consumers' homes. So they envision that everywhere you go, you would be bombarded with a reader device trying to scan you for chips, scanning your electronic cloud that would be emanating from you at all times. By the way, home applications, let me just mention a couple of those that were proposed. Procter & Gamble, one of the founding sponsors of this technology, has a video they call the Home of the Future. And in the Home of the Future, they actually have a refrigerator wired up to the internet where all of the contents of the refrigerator are constantly beamed out over the internet. They would be beamed out to the store so that they would know how quickly you're consuming the items in there, so they could maybe have them ready on the shelf for you to reorder. And this is sort of a telling application, the contents of your refrigerator would actually be beamed to your cable company in order to determine what advertisements would run on your TV. So as you're getting down to your last Budweiser, maybe an ad for Coors would run, and somebody would make some money off of knowing that about you. So let's see. Okay. Another application for this, and this is this little Hitachi Mu chip, the tiny little 0.4 millimeter chip, is to actually put these in cash money. Now, remember I said earlier that the store wants to know who you are, and they can't know that if you're not scanning a credit card, if you're not paying with a loyalty card. And one of the ways that it would be possible to know who you were down the road would be to make cash registered to individuals. If cash carries its own unique identifying number, that number can be registered to whoever last received that cash. So as you get the money out of the ATM knows your name because you had to put the ATM card in to get it. The bank teller knows your name because you had to present some form of ID or a card to get your money out of the bank. That money could easily be passed through a reader device which would record the numbers on the cash and associate them with your name. That information could then be provided, say to Homeland Security, or say to John Poindexter, who is the individual with the Defense Department who wanted to create something called Total Information Awareness, later renamed Terrorism Information Awareness, later questionable whether it will even be funded or not, but that program should send chills down your spine. That is the program that says the federal government, in the name of protecting us, needs to have access to every single piece of data about every single person in this country in every single database. Meaning everyone from your supermarket, to your phone card records, to your Kinko's photocopies, to your banking information, you name it. Having access to all of that information. All right, so you can imagine that the next information that they might want to have would be the money that you took out of the bank, and maybe where you spent it, and who you gave it to, and at what point that changed hands. This is a slightly difficult image to see, but at the bottom, I believe that's a gift certificate, but it's the same idea. There was an announcement just recently that high-denomination yen banknotes will be equipped with this, and that by 2005, euro banknotes may be equipped with this technology. And here in the United States, I'm often asked, will American currency be tagged? To my knowledge, it has not yet been tagged. To my knowledge, there are no plans underway right now to tag American currency. However, this is a story from a couple years back where an official with the Federal Reserve Bank wrote a paper in which he suggested putting tracking devices in cash, this is the craziest idea, something called the carry tax, which would actually identify the bill and cause it to become worth less money incrementally the longer you held onto it, to discourage you from hoarding, which we used to call saving, but to discourage you from hoarding money and to encourage you to spend that money and keep it in circulation. So the idea there, if you put your money in your mattress, 10 years down the road, it might be worth zero, and all of that money would have gone to tax, that it would actually be a tax paid to the government. So there is interest. This was before, I believe, RFID was widely known. I believe the federal official talking about this was talking about magnetic stripes. RFID would be a perfect application for that. Now, what if I told you, let me back up. I had lunch about a month ago with a reporter who said, well, Katherine, the read range on these things is only 20 feet. I mean, what's the big deal? If I wanted to know everything you did, I'd have to walk around behind you from 20 feet away with the reader aimed at you. And why do I need the reader? I can just watch you if I have to be 20 feet away. Now, I said, what if I told you that with only 4 reader devices, I could pretty much retrace your steps today? She said, well, how's that possible? Well, let me say it to each of you. What if I told you that with 4 reader devices, I could pretty much determine that you'd been here? Well, the first one would be a reader device at the on-ramp of the freeway that you probably got on to come here. Michelin, the tire manufacturer, is already, right now, embedding these devices between the rubber layers of its tires. Now, it is doing it to comply with some federal mandate that says tires need to be easily identified because of the big Firestone mess where the Firestone tires were defective. Other tire manufacturers have managed to comply with that mandate without putting RFID devices in the tires. So we have some concerns about how legitimate of a reason that is. But the fact remains that Michelin is putting them in there. Now, these can be read going 90 miles an hour from a couple feet away. Now, do you need one of these? Let's say it's a couple foot read range. Do you need a reader device every 2 feet down the freeway? No. You only need one in the on-ramp and one at the off-ramp. Because once you get on the freeway, you're not going to float away until you get off. So let us say that as you got on the freeway to come here this evening, you drove over a strip laid down in the road that read your identifying information from that tire. And then you drove down the freeway. Let's say you came 30 miles. And when you got off, another one went up, got off the freeway now. Now, not only would someone then know where you traveled, but they'd also know how fast you went, and they could even issue you an automatic speeding ticket if you got off the freeway a little faster than you should have. Now, once you've gotten off the freeway, the fact that you're driving down a road is usually not of much interest to anybody until you get somewhere, because you can't do too much in your car. So as you're driving down the road, the next thing you're going to do is pull into the parking lot to come into this building. So you put another little reader device down in the parking lot. Bingo, now we know where he was going. And the last reader device would be the reader device in the doorway of the building as you entered. And that doorway reader device actually doesn't need much of a read range because most doorways are only about this wide. So as you go through a doorway, you only need about 18 inches on either side, maybe 24 inches on either side. And as you walk through that doorway, it scans your entire electronic cloud and everything associated with you. Now, you may remember a couple years back, people were upset because at the Super Bowl in Florida, they had put facial recognition cameras up, and they were taking pictures of people's faces using sophisticated computer technology to match those faces with a database of known criminals. And a lot of people say, well, that's an invasion of my privacy. You shouldn't be taking my picture. I didn't do anything wrong. Again, guilty until proven innocent, that whole sort of, investigate everyone because someone may have committed a crime. That's child's play compared to what we will have if we allow this technology to go forward. Every doorway you walk through could scan your entire electronic cloud, identifying everything from your earrings down to your clothing, down to the contents of your purse, your pocket, your wallet, your briefcase, the amount of cash even in your wallet potentially, depending on how far that read range is. If even one of those devices was paid for with a credit card, they now have an audit trail on you and a pretty good chance of knowing who you are. In fact, not only that, but they probably can get a trail of your associates as well. Did your husband give you that watch? Did he pay for it with his credit card? Now we know who he is. Did you have lunch maybe last week with a coworker and maybe walked off with their pencil? Gee, we have that too. Are you carrying a can of Coke maybe that you bought out of a vending machine at a certain location? Okay, now we know when you were there. So the idea of doorways actually being able to scan us and the things we're carrying is quite chilling. Now let's talk about shoes for a minute. This actually says, are you wearing track shoes? And I apologize that the bottom of that's not visible. We'll play on words there. The shoe that I'm holding here. Let me talk about shoes for a minute. I was at a conference back in June on this technology, sponsored by people who support and want to promote this technology. So 350 business executives from some of the biggest global corporations in the world got together. And they were talking amongst themselves about how wonderful this new chipped world will be when they can know where everything is all the time. And one of the things they demoed was they held up a tennis shoe. And they pulled back the insole of the tennis shoe and revealed a hidden RFID tag underneath it. Now, this is a prototype. To my knowledge, it has not yet been produced or manufactured. But their idea, and see if this sounds as crazy to you as it did to me, their idea was that, won't it be great when we can put these devices in shoes and we can, we won't have to have those sorting parties in the back of the shoe store when they all get jumbled together and we've got to identify the size 7s and the size 8s and we've got to find the match, the left and the right. And it'll eliminate that horrible problem that all of us have had so many times where you buy 2 left shoes or a size 9 with a size 3. I don't know. Hasn't happened to me very often. That was their stated reason for wanting to put these devices in shoes. Now, just common sense would say if you aimed a reader device at a pile of shoes, all you'd get back would be a bunch of numbers. It wouldn't help you match them up any better than anything else. Maybe putting blue labels on size 7s and red labels on size 8s would be a lower tech, cheaper, and more efficient way of doing that. But what it would do if you put RFID tags in shoes is it would provide an almost foolproof way of identifying individuals. Now, a lot of people talk about, is this going to wind up in our hands? Is this going to wind up implanted in our bodies? And we'll get to that in just a second. But you don't really have to do that to identify people. Let me ask you this. When was the last time someone else wore the pair of shoes you have on your feet right now? Shoes are the one item that we don't trade. Shoes are the one item that, in fact, other people usually don't buy for us because they can't really even know our size. Shoes have to fit properly. And once they fit properly, just cultural norms and size issues and a bunch of other reasons say we don't share them. And most men only have 2 or 3 pairs of shoes they wear regularly. Most women only have 3 or 4 pairs of shoes as well. So if you could identify those shoes, and if you could put a tracking device in them, you could follow someone pretty easily. Now let me talk read range. Now remember we said up to 20, 30 feet? 20, 30 feet is not helpful. Let me tell you why. I'm standing here and I've got a reader and I go zoom, right? I now know every chip in this room. I get back 1,000 numbers. That's not helpful to me, right? It could be in some certain scenarios, but to really know individually information about what you're carrying, not as helpful. What would be helpful to me, though, would be to be able to put, let's say, a little, I don't know, let's say I'm a retailer and I want to know who you are. I can put a little mat on the floor embedded with a reader device with a 2-inch read range. You can't read further than about 2 inches away. And as you're stepping on that mat, I'm identifying you right through your shoe. These tiny chips can be embedded right into the rubber sole when this rubber was poured into the mold, this foam, in a way that you would never even know it was there. And in fact, this very pair of shoes that I'm holding, which was purchased at a Kmart store, contained this tag. This tag says, "Attention, our products have theft detection devices embedded, which will be deactivated at the register or the service desk." Now, to my knowledge, when this pair of shoes was purchased, no one actively said really anything about what that device was. I don't know if it was deactivated or not. I don't know what that device is. I don't know where it is. I do know one thing, that this company, Footstar, manufactures its shoes in China, I believe among other places. But one of the things that it said in its website was that it is experimenting with RFID technology. And one of its concerns, I believe, was that people, their factory workers might steal the tags because they're valuable tags. Now, do we know if those have unique identifying numbers? We don't. And that's one of the problems as consumers, is we have very little knowledge about, first of all, where they are, and second of all, what's being done with the information once it's being put in there. But shoes would be the ultimate tracking device, at least until we get to human tracking devices. Okay, let me talk about this oneness concept. Now, at the Chicago Retail System, or the Retail Systems 2003 convention in Chicago, there's a big publication that they hand out, and the publication talks about creating oneness among systems, supply chain, and business. Oneness meaning that all of these businesses would be working together with the same basic standard format of data. They would be sharing this data, and you would get sort of a one unified system in which everything was operating in the same way, meaning that all supermarkets would be collecting data about you in the same way, meaning that all RFID devices would be readable by the same set of readers, or would all be standardized and one. And in fact, at a recent conference where CEOs, chief executive officers from some of the biggest corporations in the world who were not yet sponsors of this technology were invited to Boston to a ritzy hotel to participate in a conference. And one of the things they were given at the conference about this technology to encourage them to get on board with it was this book called Adapt or Die. The subtitle says, "Transforming Your Supply Chain into an Adaptive Business Network," meaning that if you can keep track of all your products all the time, then you will be able to more quickly adapt to changes in the supply chain and understanding what's being bought and sold and when and how and where, and it will make you more responsive. I found this rather threatening. Adapt or die, sort of. All right. Now, the question I am always asked, when will they want to put these in human beings? Is there a desire to put them in human beings? Are we next? Well, the Auto ID Center at MIT, the global consortium with 103 of the biggest sponsors, Philip Morris, Procter & Gamble, Gillette, Sara Lee, they produced this slide which talks about the bits. Now remember we said 96 bits, you could number all the grains of sand. Okay? With 23 bits, you could number every automobile on the planet. With 29 bits, you could number every computer on the planet. And look at the third one there. With only 33 bits, you could number all the humans on the planet. And then it goes on, razor blades and grains of rice. Notice grains of rice is only 54 bits, and they're talking about 96 or 128 bits with this technology ultimately. So they'll clearly be able to number lots of things. We found it interesting that humans were listed among the things that they might want to consider numbering. You may have heard of something called the VeriChip. The VeriChip is produced by a company called Applied Digital Solutions out of Florida. They also have a technology called the Digital Angel, which you may also have heard of. The VeriChip is essentially an RFID chip. The very device I'm talking about can be queried from a distance. You beam electromagnetic energy at it. It beams back its identifying number. You can use it to identify people and track people at a distance anytime they pass within the read range of a reader device. Right? These devices are meant to be implanted into human flesh, so they actually inject it. I believe right now it's the inner, upper, inside of your arm where they literally inject these devices into people. Now, the idea for the VeriChip is that this chip not only contains a unique identifying number, but it can also contain additional information. I believe their stated application is to put things like your drug allergies or medical conditions you might have, so that if you go into a coma or have a problem, someone would scan that device and be able to tell information about you. human computer ID chip proposed. This has been pretty extensively covered in the media. The reason I want to show you this image is because it shows the little tiny thing up close. The little tiny thing is slightly more sophisticated than the one that you would stick onto a package of razor blades because it's got to actually survive inside the human body. It's encased in glass. It contains a tiny chip and a memory device and then lots of coiled wire that serves as the antenna. That's what it looks like. Oops. And my final statement would be that this technology is here, but we've got a couple things on our side. People don't like it. They really don't like it. They really, really don't like it. People all over the world have been interviewed and queried about this technology, and almost without exception, they say, heck no, we don't want it. It is not a popular technology. There are very few benefits, if any, for consumers with this technology, and believe me, they are scrambling like crazy to try to find them, but they're having a hard time. All of the benefits in this technology are on the side of the manufacturers, the side of the marketers, the side of the person who wants to run the Coors ad through your refrigerator by keeping track of what's in your house. Or the, the drug companies would like to put these devices in your medicine cabinet so they can monitor your compliance with your prescription. And when you read that, you think, well, that's kind of nice of them, maybe to make sure I'm taking my prescription right. Their stated reason is, at least internally, they will admit their reason is, if they could monitor it, they could probably get you to take your drugs more often, and then they'd make more money because you would be refilling your prescription more frequently. So even putting these reader devices in medicine cabinets, and in fact, I sat in a conference once with a bunch of medical people who were talking about this technology, and one of them actually said, wouldn't it be great if we could tell every time someone takes the lid off the toothpaste? Yeah, great. Consumers don't like it. I didn't see a single smile when I said that in the room. People don't like the idea of other people watching what they're doing and knowing what they're wearing and knowing what they're carrying. I think the privacy implications, the crime implications, and the long-term societal implications are pretty obvious. And now let me give you the scare story. Think if in the 1930s Hitler had had access to this technology. What would have been different? What would have been done differently? The technology that we have even now, let's say that you had Anne Frank living in your attic. And let's say that you knew that your purchases were being monitored with your credit card or your loyalty card. And you knew better than to buy more than usual to feed Anne Frank. And you made a decision that you and your family members would just eat a little bit less to provide for her. So you'd cook a normal amount of breakfast and you'd maybe cut off some of the eggs and put them on a plate and somebody would carry them up to Anne. They'd never know, right? Well, do you know that AC Nielsen and Catalina Marketing and all of the companies that keep track of what people buy have got this down to such a sophisticated science that one of these companies boasts it can tell if there's more people in your household than you're claiming or than you're buying for at that one store. You know how they can tell? By how much toilet tissue you buy. So unless you're sharing toilet tissue and being careful that Anne Frank only gets the little extra bit of leftover toilet tissue, they're going to know. Now, take that and multiply it by about 10,000, which is about how many things we interact with in the course of a normal week. And if all of those things were trackable and registered and followable and monitorable, if that's even a word, then the possibility for abuse is really extraordinary. Now, history has shown us many times, and I know people always say it can't happen here, but history has shown us time and time again, particularly in the 20th century when 169 million people were killed by their own governments. Those are not casualties of war. Those are not soldiers. Those are people actually brutally murdered by their own governments. Right? We have a history of power being horrifically abused on this planet. This is power beyond your wildest imagining. Right now, maybe you're thinking about marketers knowing who you are when you walk in the door. Imagine someone like Stalin or Pol Pot knowing who you were when you walked in the door, knowing who you'd spent your time with, knowing who else walked through the door with you, knowing whose fountain pen you're carrying with you. Imagine the implications of having you and your network of associates tracked, followed, and known about at all times. It would make people very compliant. It would make them very obedient citizens. But what has stopped that kind of abuse in the past is good people who've stood up and said, you know what, we don't want to live like this. We don't want to have a dictator who's going to be evil and abusive and murderous. And good people have gotten together and have overthrown those type of governments. If we got this kind of technology in place, and if it was obtained and all of that power fell into the hands of someone evil who wanted to abuse it, all of the things that have kept humanity safe from those type of abuses in the past would no longer work. You would not be able to get together as the folks did in the tavern back in Concord and Lexington back in the days of the American Revolution. You would not be able to get together in a tavern and have those conversations if EnviroCell had planted hidden microphones and cameras in there, and if there were embedded RFID readers in the seats. And by the way, that's one of the other places they've been putting those, is in furniture. They can actually put them in the seat and know who's sitting there. Now, I usually, when I conclude this talk, I say shop safe, everybody. And I'd like to, first of all, say definitely shop safe. But I'd like you to think safe. And when I say think safe, I want you to think about what it means to be surveilled. It may create some degree of safety, but I'd like to talk to you about safety for just a second. The most surveilled people on this planet, arguably, were the citizens of Stalin's Soviet Union. Those citizens ran the risk of their every piece of mail being opened, their every telephone conversation being listened in on, their every neighbor being a spy for the KGB. Were they safe? Tens of millions of people perished in that country, murdered by Stalin because they opposed what he stood for. So when you think safety, I want you to think about the tens of millions of people killed in the Soviet Union because of too much surveillance and power in the wrong hands. Safety is a little bit less about maybe running the risk of some creep down the street mugging you, and maybe a little bit more about tens of millions of people being killed by a government out of control. And that being said, I will say, shop safe, everybody, and think about the choices that you make. Thank you.